Hello, my name is Owen Warner, and my global topic is conspiracy theories. Before I begin my presentation, I just want to thank all of you for attending. I especially want to thank Miss Saidi, who gave me guidance throughout this process and repeatedly saved my citations. I want to thank my panelists for agreeing to read my paper. And finally, I want to thank my mom, who saved all of you for having to hear about trains for an hour. So now let's begin. Moment of truth. Here are 5 of the most famous and popular conspiracy theories in the United States right now. From the flat earth to the moon landing, JFK, various vaccine quackeries, and Barack Obama birthplace controversy. So, moment of truth for all of you. Who believes in at least one of these? See, we got some honest people in the back there. 50% of the US population believes in at least one of these to some extent. So don't feel bad if you raise your hands. That's just being honest. Okay, so now that I know who I'm trying to convince here, let's get started. So here's the plan for tonight. First, I'm going to cover the background of conspiracy theories. Then I'll cover some of the psychology behind them, give some examples from my papers, cover how they are influential in the modern day, and then finally give a conclusion on what I've learned and some of the big ideas. So first, some background. Conspiracy theories have been in the United States for a very long time. The first written example we have comes from 1863 in the New York Times, with someone writing about how they suspected that the British were helping the South during the Civil War and how they were doing it to get free cotton. There's not much proof of this, but verbal accusations date back even further than this, with the Eye of Providence being the all-seeing eye from the Illuminati on the dollar bill, and some of the founding fathers being rumored to believe an idea that stated that the British Parliament was trying to turn America into, essentially enslave it. So the United States has been heavily influenced by conspiracy theories for a very long time. And also I will be focusing on US conspiracy theories for this, because there's a lot more of them abroad, and we don't want to be here for 5 hours. So let's actually define what is a conspiracy and a conspiracy theory. Because while most of you probably have a broad idea, the actual details are a bit more nebulous. So a conspiracy is a group acting or plotting in secret to gain an advantage or an effect on others, almost always immorally or illegally. A conspiracy theory is a set of beliefs about a conspiracy, either that it exists typically. Well, on the other hand, misinformation is false or inaccurate information typically intended to mislead. This is important because misinformation is not always conspiracy theories, while conspiracy theories are typically always misinformation. An example of this could be misinformation would be the Earth is flat, while a conspiracy theory would be NASA is lying to us and hiding that the Earth is flat. There's also a lot of misinformation, but I will mostly be focusing on conspiracy theories because misinformation is its own presentation. So conspiracy theories can typically be categorized into one of 5 different sections. The first is enemy outside. This is a conspiracy theory coming from the outside in. For example, it could be, an example of this is that the Chinese created COVID-19 to destroy America. The counter to this is enemy within, which is a threat to the community within. This was seen a lot during the Red Panic, the Red Scare, with threats about communist agents within rising up to destroy America. Next is enemy above. This is the elites, the billionaires, the government trying to destroy society or affect it negatively somehow. And then finally, there's enemy below, which is the lower class looking to disrupt social order. Typically, this is seen through them trying to rise up, and it's typically communism again. And then finally, there's benevolent conspiracies. The conspiracy was erased, but the idea behind this one is that there's a secret group trying to plot to help a different group or agency. This is typically seen with more rapture-related conspiracy theories, and there's also one that's stated that a secret group is trying to help America. These ones are the most rare, but we will be discussing a type of one later in this paper. So finally, how do you identify conspiracy theory? After all, nothing really matters if you can't tell it's a conspiracy theory. So there's a couple major ways. First is the narrative. Question the strength of the evidence behind the conspiracy theory. Is the evidence strong? Is it connected? Typically, an actual conspiracy, if you remove one piece of evidence, the rest of it can still be tied together via connections between various people. But conspiracies are a lot more vulnerable to having one piece of evidence removed and then the whole thing falling apart. Second is to analyze who has made it or is currently promoting it. Are they a trustworthy source? If you have, I don't know, like your history teacher telling you about something, it's probably trustworthy. But if you have Alex Jones, maybe not. Next, there's evidence behind it. Typically, conspiracy theories will focus a lot more on evidence for something while ignoring against, while actual conspiracies won't. If a conspiracy theory or a conspiracy you're looking into seems to completely ignore anything that argues against it, it's probably a conspiracy theory. Next, there's the size. The bigger something is, the more likely it is to be false. The more people, the more time, the bigger effect. All of these things, the bigger it is, the less likely it is. And then finally, there's realism. This is common sense. Don't assume that everything has to be convoluted 50-step plans. It's more likely that the simpler explanation is true. This one doesn't really work if you're involved or biased in a conspiracy theory, but if you're looking from the outside, it does work pretty well. So next, let's discuss some of the psychology behind conspiracy theories. First is how and why. Why do they come into existence? Because they don't magically pop out of the ether. Conspiracy theories typically become, when you're trying to explain an event or change, they're typically made by the losers of a shift in the status quo or an event. And they create the conspiracy theory to target whoever's benefiting or whoever's winning, and then try and regain some of that power. In the modern day, this doesn't apply quite as much due to the internet shaking things up, but it's still generally true. An example of how the modern day kind of shifts this up can be seen with Pizzagate in 2016. This was a conspiracy theory that started from some leaked Democrat Party emails on WikiLeaks that was picked up by a group on 4chan, and the emails happened to discuss cheese pizza, and that stands for inappropriate acts with children on that specific website. And then they reinforced this with some Instagram posts that theoretically proved this. And then this finally led to an armed individual breaking into said pizzeria and then trying to threaten it to find the threatened children. Something that should be noted is that these children were in the basement of the pizzeria, and the pizzeria has no basement. So it doesn't quite work out. Next, there's motivated reasoning. Motivated reasoning is an idea in psychology where you are more likely to believe in something that supports your side, or reasons that you're more likely to believe in something. These, in conspiracy theories, can be broken down into three main sections. First, there's confirmation bias. If something agrees with what you think, you're more likely to believe it. Second, there's disconfirmation bias. If something disagrees with what other people believe, your opponents are less likely to believe, you're more likely to agree with it. And then finally, there's attitude congruence bias. This is just kind of saying that you are biased towards your side. If you're weighing two things and they're semi-equal, then if one of them is your side and one of them is their side, then you are more likely to agree with your side when analyzing something. So next is the conspiracy effect. This is why people actually start being committed to conspiracy theories and start joining them, rather than just being biased towards them. So the first reason is proxy conspiracism. This is where the details of conspiracy theory don't really matter. The point is that they are targeting a group or an individual or cause a specific effect if the conspiracy theory was true. So they believe it specifically to attempt to cause that effect. Second is tribal conspiracism. This is where you believe in a conspiracy theory because other people in your tribe or group agree with it, and you want to get along with them, so you also believe in it. Third is constructive conspiracism. This one is kind of the strangest because you believe in a conspiracy theory not because you think it's true, but because the threat of it not being true is significantly scarier. This can be seen most easily in climate change-related conspiracy theories because climate change is big and scary in destroying our world. So if you just kind of pretend that's not true, it's not an issue that you have to deal with instead of actually confronting a massive problem. So there are a couple of traits that cause belief in conspiracy theories. I'm not saying this is guaranteed, but they've been shown to be more likely. The first is extremism. If you're a radical, either on the left or right wing, you're more likely to believe in conspiracy theories. Paranoia. If you are paranoid, if you don't trust people, you're more likely to believe in conspiracy theories because that gives you a reason to justify your disbelief in people. Next, there's narcissism. If you believe that you are special and you are unique, then conspiracy theories once again justify this because you are not among the sheeple. You are special. You figured out the truth in the world. There's anxiety. If you're worried, conspiracy theories once again justify that and justify your belief. Similarly with fear, if you're afraid, conspiracy theories give you a target for your fear so that you can turn it into something more productive like anger. And then finally, there's a lack of control. If you don't feel in control of your life, then you'll probably feel a lot better if someone tells you that the Illuminati are ruining it and it's not just the world or your own decisions. Next is some of the justifications for conspiracy theories. How conspiracy theories are actually reinforced and people actually believe in them. First is historical precedent. This summarizes down to the belief that since a group or conspiracy theory has happened before, it'll happen again. This can typically be seen with disproving the other side, saying, hey, they were wrong about this, so we must be right. Or that, hey, there's been conspiracy theories before, so why can't there be this one? This isn't actual evidence. It's just looking at patterns, and patterns aren't really proof in this case. Next is uniqueness and paranoia. Conspiracy theories give you a reason to feel unique, you're special, you're smart, you figured out the truth in the world that they're hiding from you. We're not going to clarify who they are, though. And then this lets you, as I said, feel unique. Next, there's targeted skepticism. You'll see this one in all of the conspiracy theories, where what they do is they look at the other side a lot more. They say, hey, what is every single possible flaw we can find in their evidence? And then you point out any flaws in their evidence, and suddenly the skepticism magically disappears. They're always targeted their skepticism towards the enemies of the conspiracy theory, never towards the conspiracy theory itself. Next, credible evidence. This is typically the evidence that conspiracy theorists try to use to justify their conspiracy theory. This generally comes in three major types. The first is eyewitness evidence. Because an eyewitness, if someone sees it, it's true. The problem is that eyewitnesses are notoriously unreliable. It is very easy to convince an eyewitness to change their statement via leading questions, and they're just generally wrong about 40% of the time in police cases. Next, there's experts. These experts generally come in one of two different kinds. First, they are an expert. It's just not an expert in the field that they're talking about. An example of this is can be seen in the Flat Earth, where they have a lot of experts. They're just generally, doctors in agriculture rather than astronomy. Or the experts are relying on heavily outdated information. Yes, this would have been experts back in the 1800s, but unfortunately it is now the 21st century, and that doesn't quite work. Finally, there is logical arguments. These are the logic that is used to reinforce these conspiracy theories. And it's generally consisting of various kinds of logical fallacies. The first is circular reasoning. This is because X, Y, and because Y, X. An example of this could be the government is destroying all evidence of our conspiracy theory, and our evidence is that the government has destroyed all of it. There's no evidence because there is no evidence. The next example of this is false balance. I provided a diagram over there that kind of sees this. This is the idea that since there are two sides, they should have equal rights to present their findings and be treated equally. Because, 50-50, even split. This is kind of shown on to the right, where climate scientists pretty much all agree that, hey, climate change is real. However, Fox News somehow happens to find a lot of people who don't really agree with climate change, in contrast to the actual majority, which presents a false narrative that, hey, this is a disputed topic, when in reality, it's not really disputed at all. Next, there's double standards. This is very similar to targeted skepticism, where you require ironclad proof for the other side, but even the flimsiest of dismissals of the opposing side's evidence are taken at face value. Then there's a collection of smaller ones that are used a lot. The first of these are ad hominem attacks. You attack someone on the other side personally rather than attacking their evidence. They say they're a liar, they're a liberal, who knows what the insults are. But the point is that they are a character trait that you do not like, and ergo you can't trust them, and you can't trust their evidence. Another example of this is the Mont and Bailey fallacy. This one also pops up a lot, typically in more controversial conspiracy theories. where there's 2 points to the conspiracy theory. One is the very controversial point that they're actually trying to push, and then one is the safer, the Bailey, the less controversial point. So what they do is they go out saying, if we look at JFK, for instance, hey, the Russians shot JFK. And then someone comes along and say, hey, that's not really very reasonable. The evidence doesn't show this at all. Oswald didn't really communicate with him. And then they say, no. Well, what I was really saying is that we can't entirely trust all the evidence that they're showing. It's a bit dubious. The government messed up. That's a more reliable argument. It's based on more evidence. And then as soon as the counter argument leaves, you immediately go back to making your main argument of, hey, the Russians shot JFK. So there's a lot of different justifications used, and we'll see some of them in the examples here. So there's a lot of different conspiracy theories out there. These are the ones that I just kind of spitballed from what I remember. This goes from Princess Diana assassinations to the Earth isn't real to the wizard people secretly controlling the world. Unfortunately, we don't have quite enough time to go through all of these, so instead we're going to talk about the moon landing. This is one that I'm sure you have all heard of at this point. And the basic idea started in 1976 with We Never Went to the Moon, America's $30 billion swindle by Bill Kaysing. This book went basically nowhere until the flat earthers came along it and said, hey, if we didn't go to the moon, that means that there's no photos showing that the Earth is round. We should support this. And so they did, and suddenly it became popular. This had initial burst. It's kind of died off mostly at this point. But the basic idea is that Apollo 11 and all subsequent moon landings, but primarily Apollo 11, have been faked to some extent by NASA. This varies from we didn't leave Earth to we didn't leave the atmosphere to we went to like space but never landed on the moon to we landed on the moon but they faked all the footage there to hide something. The category is enemy above, NASA, the big NASA, big government agency is lying to you. It's hiding the truth. 11% of the US population has some level of doubts about the Apollo 11 landing, which is depressingly high and shows that this isn't completely irrelevant. So what are the basic claims that are said here? So the first is that the photos are fake. These two are the ones that you will run across the most often. The first shows the flag waving in the wind. And obviously, if you're on the moon, there's no atmosphere. The flag can't wave. Clearly, it must be faked in some studio on Earth. The second is seen here. This shadow is going this way, this shadow is going this way. They don't line up. That's not parallel. That's not how the sun works. So if the shadows aren't parallel, it's most likely lighting from a studio. It's faked. Third, there's no stars back here. In space, there's stars, and you can generally see them. Since we can't see the stars, must be faked. The second one, this is smaller, but I really liked it. It's Yugoslavia did it. It's not the United States. It's not the Russians. It's not the Chinese. No, it's Yugoslavia. They sold us. They sold the U.S. their space program, and we took it there. The United States didn't really do anything. The next one is radiation. Around Earth, there's a bunch of radiation rings. They're called the Van Allen belts. Basically, they have very high levels of radiation. If you go through that, you'd get irradiated and you would die. So clearly, we couldn't leave Earth because we'd all be zapped via radiation and die. And then finally, the argument is that nobody has gone to the moon since the last landing. So clearly, if nobody's gone to the moon, that means we can't go to the moon, and it's faked. So let's talk about some counter-arguments real quick. First, there are reasons for the flag. There are actually wrinkles because going to space takes a lot of force and it wrinkles the flag. Then when you get to the moon and you put down the flag, they had a little pole along the top to stop it from falling down due to the gravity. And then the gravity was just so weak that it couldn't actually straighten out the flag once they landed. The shadow, the lack of stars and shadows both kind of come from the same thing. And this is albedo. Albedo is how reflective a surface is. On Earth, 0 is like 100% absorption, pure black. 1 is 100% reflection. Things on Earth are generally more on the 0 side, while the moon has a 0.09, so 9% of all light is reflected. This makes the moon a lot brighter, and disrupts what we'd typically expect from shadows. And this also explains the stars, because the stars are fairly dim, and all of the light shining would prevent the cameras from taking photos of the stars. And while they could theoretically take photos, it would have kind of ruined the image of, the moon, which is why they were there, so that's why they didn't do it. Another reason that the shadows are off is because there's no atmosphere on the moon, which kind of disrupts the standard reflection of the light's rays compared to Earth. And then, tragically, Yugoslavia did not do it. I know, this is a shock to many of you, but the Yugoslavians did not, in fact, have a very good space program. Well, they did have a couple of really good scientists that did come up with a lot of discoveries that we and the Russians later used. They didn't actually have very much money and didn't have a very good space program. Third, the radiation levels, while very high in some points, vary based on where you go through the Van Allen belts. And as such, NASA, added radiation blockers, and they just orbited through the parts that were the lowest. This led to the astronauts receiving 0.64 rads, which is the unit of radiation, per year. The average person each year receives 0.9, so it's very low. And a lethal dose is 600. So they need to be off by a magnitude of about 1,000, which isn't desperately likely. And then third, there's no reason to return, really. We found a lot of the stuff that we needed from the moon. We got the publicity, Cold War's over, we got the moon rocks. So there's not a lot of desperate reasons to return. NASA also has the problem of being cripplingly broke. Basically every single year since we've gone to the moon, they have had less and less and less budget. And when combined with inflation, that means that while they may have a lot of money for one of us, for a space agency where everything needs to be custom built and is very expensive, they do not have a lot of money. In addition, priorities pretty much constantly shift, so they waste a lot of money due to shifting priorities and needing to do, moon travel one day and satellites the next. So there are also some general counterarguments that aren't just refuting the claims of the moon landing hoaxers. The first is that there's a lot of evidence. A lot of amateur astronomers saw, the rocket from Earth. There's hundreds of hours of audio and footage from the moon landing. There's pictures. There's, moon rocks, which would be very, very hard to fake. And then beyond that, the USSR was there, and they were also very advanced. And if they could have proven this was fake, they absolutely would have, because, Cold War, and it would have made America look very bad. And then finally, if we all remember back to the beginning, this is a really big project that America would have needed to fake, with millions of people working on it, and as was said, $30 billion. Where did it all go if this was all faked? Why would they do this? So someone actually did the research later, basing the rate of discovery on stuff like MK Ultra, which was an actual conspiracy, and they discovered that in the best case scenario, there'd be a 95% chance of a leak within 3.7 years of the moon landing. And since it has been a tiny bit longer than that, I find it highly unlikely that this was faked. So I did do 2 additional conspiracies that were not conspiracy theories. We're not going to be going into too much here. But the basic idea is similar to these. They have evidence. The evidence is generally pretty easily able to be refuted or argued against. The flat Earth is, once again, NASA. It's all NASA's fault. And then for JFK, it's literally everyone. Just throw whatever 3-letter agency you want on there. I'm sure someone has argued for it. I will say JFK, due to increasing government incompetence as it goes on, does have slightly less refuting evidence than flat Earth. But if you do your research, you'll find that it is highly unlikely that Oswald collaborated with anyone to shoot JFK. So let's get on to conspiracy theories in the modern day. So we have to start with a warning. I'm sorry, there's politics ahead. I know, this is a terrible fate for all of us. But, I believe my things, you believe you. If we all agree that we don't get angry here and that we try and stay objective, it'll all be all right. We're all good with that? Good. Fantastic. So first, let's start with social media real quick. 73% of Americans currently believe that conspiracy theories are out of control, and 59% believe that more people believe in conspiracy theories than compared to 25 years ago, which is true. In addition to that, 77% of Americans believe that social media is at least partially responsible, and those 77% are absolutely correct. over to the side here, I put the 4 biggest culprits of this problem. And I'm going to go from worst to best real quick, or best to worst, I suppose. So first, we got YouTube. YouTube has algorithm problems. I'm sure if you've used YouTube, you've heard people complain about this before. And this is especially notable in conspiracy theories, with former employees talking about how there is a noted bias towards conspiracy theories within the YouTube algorithm. This is primarily seen in 3 main sections. The first is Flat Earth, the second is COVID-19, and the third is the anti-vaxxers. Studies at Flat Earth conventions show that if you ask people there, over a supermajority, which is 67%, will say that they started believing in Flat Earth because of YouTube. So a significant amount of the young and motivated Flat Earth population are big believers because of YouTube. In addition, there's a significant amount of anti-vax and COVID individuals on there that have higher rates of support than noted on other platforms. Next, we have Facebook/Meta. Facebook also has algorithm problems. You're going to notice this pattern for a lot of them. And then what happens with their algorithm is kind of unique because people look for conspiracy theories on there, which leads to them being popular, which leads to the algorithm promoting it, which leads to more conspiracy theories. And while they do have an attempt to reduce this by shadow banning, which is kind of just driving away engagement from posts, their shadow banning is kind of weak, so it doesn't work super well. And this means that conspiracy theories, especially more extremely right-leaning conspiracy theories, are up to twice as popular than expected for a account of a certain follower amount on Facebook. This can be especially seen with the 2020 election having 20% of all posts being some kind of conspiracy theory, which is kind of insane. Next, we have TikTok. I'm sure this is a shock to everyone. TikTok, once again, algorithm favors conspiracy theories. They are slightly unique in that it is really, really easy to get monetized on TikTok. They say you can't do it if you post conspiracy theories. That is not true. So a lot of conspiracy theorists get monetized on there so that they can actually get paid for what they're making and then keep posting it. The short form content, which is content under a minute or two, also means it's a lot easier to make posts there than on places like YouTube, which requires multiple minutes of effort. The short form content has also led to something unique on TikTok. First, that the conspiracy theories are way crazier than these other platforms. And second, that there's a lot more AI conspiracy theories, which are ones that, AI pictures, AI voice, zero effort involved. But dang, do they get a lot of views. And then fourth, there is Twitter/X. Twitter, which I'm going to define as before Elon Musk bought it, was flawed. But relative to these other ones, it wasn't really that bad. It did have some algorithm problems, but it did have about 10,000 people on the moderation and content safety team. And when big conspiracy theories, especially QAnon, which we will discuss later, came around, they did kind of ban a lot of the major influencers in that category. And then a wild Elon Musk hit it and turned it into X. And things got way worse. 30% of the moderation team is now gone, along with 3 heads of moderation within 4 years, which is not good for any organization. It's also noted to have significantly slower response time to reports. It's noted to not have tested its algorithms for blocking spam. And its algorithms also don't work for blocking conspiracy theories and general misinformation, which, isn't great. And then finally, Elon Musk implemented a general amnesty policy, where amnesty is like a forgiveness of someone's crimes for something. In this case, it was all conspiracy theorists, especially QAnon. So what happens is these people get unbanned, and then some conspiracy theories increase in their posting amount and views by over 150%. So next, politics. Yay. Historically speaking, politics have not been a major factor in conspiracy theories. I'm not saying there weren't any. I mean, we only have to look at history, like the USS Maine justifying a declaration of war on Spain. That doesn't mean that it was nearly as big as today. And if this was 2016, I would not be talking about this. Unfortunately for all of us, it isn't, which means that I do have to talk about it. Both parties are affected to this by varying extents, and I will be focusing primarily on the actual individuals in parties rather than their user base or voters. And look, y'all, the Republican Party is the main culprit here. Like, let's be brutally honest for a minute. To quickly go through the Democratic Party, because I'm not really going to discuss them after this, a couple major aides and donors have been noted to publicly promote conspiracy theories. This was especially noted around the first attempted assassination of Donald Trump. And then one former rep that was around during 2014 and 2016, Cynthia McKinney, was known to promote 9/11 conspiracy theories about the government causing it or hiding it, something along those lines. There has also been an increase in conspiracism in certain more radical parts of the Democratic voting base. And then we'll get to Republicans in a minute. But first, QAnon. Most of you probably haven't heard of this, but QAnon is what is known as a mythic conspiracy theory, which is a unique type of conspiracy theory where they just said that all of that evidence stuff is for cowards. Instead, what we need is popularity, because if people believe in it, then it's more likely to be true. And if you just keep believing in it, it'll become true. This isn't how it works. But the general idea is that Donald Trump and a cabal of people in the government are working to save the US government from a different cabal known as the Deep State, which is a group of Satan-worshipping pedophiles who are trying to destroy America. He's going to destroy this group in a day known as the Storm, which will be a violent uprising against the government. If you think back to January 2021, you may notice this aligns with a certain event. And if that did have an event, a lot of those people were QAnon believers, unsurprisingly. So most of the information about this conspiracy theory has been communicated in two ways. The first of these is Donald Trump, but this is more indirect. What happens is that believers in this look at his speeches and they say, okay, how can we interpret this to support this? Well, he doesn't say direct things. They often interpret what he says or how he acts around certain statements to support certain parts of the conspiracy theory. And then second, there's an individual known as Q. Q is an individual that only posts on 4 and 8chan, which are websites dedicated to freedom of speech, all freedom of speech, including the parts that shouldn't be quite so free. But in summary, this individual posts information that is then interpreted by the QAnon believers to support this conspiracy theory. So let's take a look at some of those posts, shall we? So this is a typical post. If we read it real quick, we'll see blunt indirect time, Adam Schiff is a traitor to our country, leaker, NatSec evil, TikTok, hope the 7.8 million was worth it, enjoy the show, Q. And shortly after, false flags, POTUS 100% insulated, expect fireworks, justice. So, to most of us, this sounds like nonsense. It is ambiguous, and it is completely unfalsifiable, because what are they saying? And that is absolutely the point. If it is nonsense, then you can't prove it means everything. If it's ambiguous, you can interpret it to mean anything. You can interpret it to support what you like, and you can ignore the bits that you don't like. Say that, you don't like the POTUS. Then you can interpret it to say, like, hey, they're bad. Or you can just focus on Adam Schiff, whoever that is, and say that, hey, he's evil, he's ruining everything. And then finally, being unfalsifiable. This means that you are always right, because you can't be wrong, because what are you proving wrong? There is nothing to prove wrong here. So it's a self-justifying conspiracy theory, where it's always right, it's never wrong, and it can't be proven wrong. This is amplified by the fact that another one of his posts said that sometimes he posts misinformation to throw off the deep state. So who knows what's true at this point? And then second, you are probably wondering what this is. This is a collection of all QAnon beliefs. It goes from somewhere up here, then loops around here, and then goes down this way, and then does a wibbly bit in the middle before ending over here. Now, to most of us, we're not quite sure how the Egyptian sun god Ra is connected to the Rockefellers. And the point is that he isn't. Once again, it's nonsense, it's ambiguous, and it's completely unfalsifiable. Believe whatever you want, don't believe whatever you want, so you are always right and you can't be disproven. This is pretty much the ultimate populist conspiracy theory, because to an extent not seen with pretty much any other conspiracy theory, You can only believe in the bits that you like and ignore the parts you don't. So, let's talk about the focus of that conspiracy theory now, shall we? Donald Trump, like him or not, he says a lot of things. He tweets a lot of things. He retweets a lot of things. And a lot of those things over time have been conspiracy theories. The first type of conspiracy theory he promotes are generally against foreign nationals. Two examples of this are saying that Justin Trudeau, the Canadian PM, is the son of Fidel Castro. And the second is saying that Montenegro, a 600,000 person state on the Balkans that does not border any hostile nation and has a military of 3,000 people, is very aggressive in trying to start World War III. This is fairly unprecedented in US history for a president to promote these ideas against other nations with no provocation that are theoretically our allies. This continues with his internal political opponents. I'm not really going to go into the whole Biden situation here because that's a bit political for even me, but as an example against Obama, he has claimed that he faked the bin Laden killing, as shown with this retweet here, and possibly killed SEAL Team 6 to hide this faking, which is extremely interesting. And then finally, we have national political events. These are notably the 2020 election being rigged and the January 6th Capitol attacks. They either didn't happen, or if they did happen, they weren't that bad. This is, once again, completely unprecedented and not great for a president to do because you are undermining the US democratic system by saying the election isn't real. And then you're also undermining an actual event that happened. Like, we have video, we have pictures, we have audio. Some of these people were convicted, even if a lot of them have been since freed, but it's fairly unprecedented for a president to do. And then next we have Elon Musk. Elon Musk, wow, he says a lot more things than Donald Trump. 67 tweets a day, and a lot of them are conspiracy theories. So the first is against specific individuals. I'm just going to put this quote here. Marx was a capitalist. He even wrote a book about it. Marx, the founder of communism. I'm not going to elaborate any further. That says everything it needs to. And then second, he's targeted specific groups as well. These are slightly less funny, with him saying that the Jews, as in the entire population, are trying to Great Replacement America. What is Great Replacement, you may ask? It is the idea that the Caucasian, true American population is trying to be wiped out and undermined to be replaced with a different group, whether they be Jewish or immigrants, generally someone who is un-American. And then the second one is that South Africa is committing a genocide on whites. There's no evidence for either of these. And then finally, there is the US Cabinet. Once again, a group that has historically been fairly non-conspiracy theorist, and now has at least 5 supporters of conspiracy theories in roles that will significantly affect some parts of their performance. This can be seen with the Secretary of State, who runs the elections, doubting the veracity of the 2020 elections, and then more famously, the Secretary of Health being an anti-vaxxer. I'm not going to elaborate on that. And then finally, conclusions. What can we do? So there are a couple of ways to manage conspiracy theories on a widespread societal scale. The first of these is to have a strong education system. If you are educated, if you are literate, especially literate, then you are more likely to not believe in conspiracy theories. For each level of education, like high school, grad school, PhD, you are about 10% less likely to believe in a conspiracy theory compared to the previous level of education. Next, there's unemployment and poverty. Each of these, if you are unemployed and if you are impoverished, then you are 50% or more likely to believe in a conspiracy theory. This partially ties in with the education system. If everyone had a high level of literacy, there'd be about an extra 2.2 trillion added to the US GDP, which would significantly help with the poverty problem. Next, there's media literacy. If you understand what you're reading and what you're doing, then you're more likely to, understand it's a conspiracy theory, and maybe I should look a bit more into this instead of blindly believing it. And then finally, there's pre-bunking and debunking. Pre-bunking is warning people about conspiracy theories ahead of time, saying, hey, the Earth isn't flat, the moon landing happened. This significantly reduces the belief in conspiracy theories. And then debunking is arguing against conspiracy theories once people believe in them. Both of these are effective and they both should be done. Now, one thing that should be noted is that the US government is currently gutting the education system, is gutting the healthcare system, which will decrease the amount of money people have, adding some level of tariffs, who knows, based on the day, which will once again not help with poverty. So generally speaking, as a society, we are actively and provably backsliding in terms of managing conspiracy theories. So since we can't really do anything about that, let's talk about what we as individuals can do. So first of all, at least consider if your political candidates are supporting conspiracy theories. I know in today's climate, this is mostly irrelevant, with most people solely voting based on if they're Democrat or Republican. But please, for my sake, at least think about it. Also, more reasonably, try and stay educated about conspiracy theories. Know the big ones, know the popular ones. As I said, pre-bunking makes you way less likely to believe. So if you know, then you can stop yourself from believing and hopefully argue against it if other people believe. And then if friends or family believe in conspiracy theories, then here's what you can do to actually talk to them and to not just have yelling conversations with them. First, don't be emotional. This is mainly negative emotions. Don't show fear, anger, rage. All of these create a spiral of emotions, and then you're not actually going to accomplish anything. Second, understand the other side. Don't just immediately go into this based on your pre-existing knowledge, because odds are it's not very accurate. And what you want to do is you want to have an accurate understanding, so do some research about why they might believe this and what the actual ideas of said conspiracy theory are. Third, be honest. If you lie to people, they're not going to believe you. So don't lie to people in conversations, and then you're more likely to actually have an impact. Fourth, show them that change is all right. If they make some good points about something, don't just deny it because you're having an argument about conspiracy theories. Actually consider it. Show them that it is all right to change, and then they might change their opinions. And then finally, know how to question. Don't ask questions like, why would you believe this? And don't you think that belief is stupid? Because that's not going to accomplish much. Ask, I guess, scientific questions. Ask questions that actually investigate things and aren't just doing it to make yourself feel better. So finally, Q&A. If you have any questions, please ask. Okay, well,
It's a fascinating presentation. It's a fascinating problem. It's a problem at every level, certainly that you mentioned, politically, socioculturally, economics, all. I'm interested in freedom and conspiracy theories in terms of freedom of thought, First Amendment freedoms, and so forth. Because I don't know, everything seems to be so out of control. I do want to point out, too, that both Donald Trump and Elon Musk have degrees from the University of Pennsylvania. That's usually considered to be a pretty good education. But having said that, that's a whole other sort of component. Well, what do you think about, Owen, what do you think about whether or not, because these conspiracy theories, as you did a nice job historically, showing how far back they go. I hate to be cynical, but I almost think that freedom itself includes and begs conspiracy theories. I don't know how the government would, or anybody would stop. I want to get your opinion on this after all the great research you did.
Yeah.
All your great thinking about it. Is freedom and conspiracy theories, is that an inevitable, impossibility? Because people tend to believe whatever they want, they tend to base it on whatever they want. So after all this great stuff, what do you think about that? Is freedom itself a problem for conspiracy theory?
My opinion is that conspiracy theories are completely inevitable. They will never be entirely wiped out, and it is utterly futile to try to do that. But what we can do is try and reduce and kind of marginalize their impact. As I said, like education, not having politicians that publicly support conspiracy theories and mainstream them. There's a lot of like you said, being cynical about this is pretty good, because freedom of speech, freedom of thought, inevitably means that there will be conspiracy theories. I wrote about this more in my paper, but humans love to look for patterns. And this will inevitably lead to some people finding patterns that they think show a conspiracy theory. Like Princess Diana being assassinated or JFK being shot. So I don't think that they'll ever be gone entirely, but I think that the government could take a lot more steps to warn people about it, to encourage a culture that is more inquisitive and actually thinks about ideas before just saying hey, let's jump along and believe in a conspiracy theory.
Just to follow up on that, do you think the government can actually, in some way, legislatively involve themselves in conspiracy theories? I mean, I'm interested in that too, because we do have laws against slander and different things like that. Slander and libel both,
Yeah.
to some extent. But again, I'm interested in how far the government can go with this.
Okay.
In terms of judging this, I mean, the government itself was a conspiracy theorist many times when it created the Alien and Sedition Acts and other things like that.
Yeah.
If you go against the government, we're coming to get you. We did that at the very beginning of the country. We did that in 1917 and 1918, right? And while we were in the midst of, or near the end of World War I, and so forth. Do you think there's much hope for the government?
So So here's what I'll say. I don't think the government can directly legislate away the problem directly. I kind of forgot to mention this, but a part of my paper was talking about the conventional media, which is affected by stuff like libel laws and slander. And that has been somewhat more effective in reducing the amount of people that believe in conspiracy theories. But, with individuals like Tucker Carlson, it's been shown that it doesn't work entirely. But the problem is, now we have social media. Are you really going to go after every single average Joe who goes on Twitter and posts, "Lol, the earth is flat," and then sue them for a libel case? You can't do that. It's not reasonable. So I think what the government needs to do is focus on the root causes and what statistically speaking has the most impact on conspiracy theories, which is stuff like education and literacy, and focus on improving that rather than just trying to hammer down on the problem directly, like talking about flat earth or the moon landing or stuff, because that will absolutely not work.
Do you have a favorite conspiracy theory or one that you find to be the most entertaining?
Yes. So, my favorite conspiracy theory is probably the sovereign citizen movement, which is a US-Canadian conspiracy theory that are kind of like the flat earthers of legal situations, which sounds really weird on the surface, but then you look into it and it gets exponentially funnier. So their first belief is that in legal documents, your name is typically written in capital letters, right? They believe that the government is enslaving you through this. And if you just write your name in lowercase, nothing applies to you. So you can just write your name in lowercase and then court orders don't mean none of that. Nothing affects you. And then beyond that, they believe that secretly at birth, the government just gives you millions of dollars. They're obligated to do this. And you can only access it by using your lowercase name conspiracy, your lowercase name, because the uppercase one doesn't let you access it.
Have you tried it?
I did. It tragically did not work. Another big thing they believe in, significantly less fortunately, is they believe that anything after the 12th Amendment is generally nonsense and doesn't actually work, since the founding fathers were generally all dead by then. So women can't vote, black people can't vote. Yep, none of them have rights, which is significantly less funny, and I don't really like that. But it's true, they believe in it. So yeah, that's one of the more absurd ones that I find amusing.
Or either today or when you were younger, were there any conspiracy theories that you believed in yourself?
All the ones I believed in were true.
What is the connection between the tinfoil hat and conspiracy theories?
The tinfoil hat, it's from the aliens. I didn't really talk about alien beliefs and Area 51 in this, but it primarily comes from that, from the 8 or the 5G. 5G belief is obviously that the 5G brainwaves are either influencing you or destroying your brain. And then the aliens are, also influencing you and destroying your brain. And tinfoil is the only way to deflect it. So if you make a tinfoil hat, you're safe. That's where it comes from.
As far as true conspiracy theories go, how do you find that? I know you mentioned one, I haven't heard of it. But how do you find out, like, for your research, these conspiracy theories being true? Like, how does that help fuel other conspiracy movements or create new ones? How does that impact?
So so the big example of this is really seen in Watergate. Watergate was a conspiracy theory that very quickly turned into an actual conspiracy. Obviously, with breaking into the opposing party's headquarters to steal their stuff, being looked down on. This did lead to a lot more anti-governmental sentiment, which then led to more anti-government conspiracy theories following it. Like, for instance, JFK is after that. Moon landing after that. That's kind of when NASA started to get rolled into the flat earthers after that. So generally, if there's like a big cultural shift, that'll also bring along a new spate of conspiracy theories. We're still kind of in the anti-government sort of phase, so you'll see a lot more of those, like QAnon, for example, or Pizzagate.
How does one person get so involved in something like this? And how are these I know they're the followers, and how are people so willing to get enthralled in this if they're spending time making things like that?
So first of all, something really funny about Q. It's actually two people. So I mentioned earlier that they post on two different platforms, and analysis of how they write and how they post shows that they're definitively two different people. So it's not even one Q, which is pretty funny to me. And then beyond that, like I discussed in the psychology component, I think QAnon significantly relies on especially the tribalism and the proxy, because QAnon targets the deep state. Who is the deep state? Being brutally honest, it's the Democrats. And the tribalism is especially seen more in the MAGA movement. It's a way to show you're loyal, You don't like the opposing party, but, yelling about it only gets you so far. So if you believe in something more extreme, you're more dedicated in your belief. You're more showing how you are a loyalist and how you are included in the tribe. So, and how it gets so extreme, there's a lot of different research about different extremism pipelines. It's definitely to some extent, including cult psychology, exclude you from other groups. You can only trust the leader, ideas like that. I don't really have time to get into it, nor the knowledge. But if you look further into that, it will probably have more information for you.
I've seen this floating around on social media, so I'm curious to ask if, based on the research, do you think maybe that religion is just one big conspiracy, or that at the very least promotes conspiratorial thinking?
I'll tackle the second one first there. Yes, it provably does. The more religious you are, the more likely you are to believe in conspiracy theories. There is an exception to this. If you only go to church once a week, you're actually less likely to believe in conspiracy theories. So be religious, but not too religious. And then religion being a conspiracy theory, I don't think it would be by the definition that I gave, because a conspiracy theory is a set of beliefs, which religion does follow, about an individual or group trying to cause an effect or influence to have a specific outcome. Now, a lot of religions typically have the deities or deity as an omnipotent power. They are the singular power in that religion. So in that case, they don't really need to have a cause or effect, because they can just kind of do it whenever. What's the point, So I don't think they're a classical conspiracy theory, but it could be argued that they are one, yes.
So in light of that, because this also is very interesting about what gets defined as a conspiracy theory. So if, I'm sure you paid attention to Cory Booker's 25-hour speech on the House floor.
Yes.
And where in which he painted Trump as evil and destroying America and so forth and so on. Was that a conspiracy theory?
Yes and no. Okay, so here's what I'll say. Evil and destroying America are variable terms. They don't have a set definition. Maybe you define destroying as America as ever increasing the debt limit. Every single time the debt limit is increased, you are destroying America. In which case, absolutely, every president has destroyed America pretty much. But if you destroy America as entirely annihilating the country, then yes, it would be a conspiracy theory because clearly there's still a U.S. government. Once again, evil, same thing. It's based on your beliefs. Maybe you say that he's not evil. He's, as we've discussed up here, saving America from the deep state. On the other hand, you could look at the fact, you could say his increased rate of deportations is an evil thing. You are removing people from places that they have lived for years or potentially decades, and then sending them to generally pretty terrible conditions in foreign nations. And you could define that as evil. So I think it is based on how you would define a lot of the things that he says. So once again, potentially, depends on your beliefs.
So I just started using Instagram a couple of months ago, and I was pretty surprised that you didn't put it up on there. But another thing I was thinking about was when you talked about the Elon Musk tweet and how he was like, the Jewish are going to replace everyone in America. Elon Musk is pretty Republican, right? Like he supports Trump.
Yes, he is a.
Instagram, it feels like a lot of people are going after the Jewish because you got like the left-leaning people that are mad about Gaza and Palestine. They're like the Jews caused 9/11. It's like stuff like that, and then you have. I was under the impression that the right wing supported Israel because,
Okay. Yeah, I get it. Okay, so let's elaborate a bit here. So I didn't really discuss this in my paper because it's not very funny, but the two main groups that are primarily targeted are first and by far the Jews, and secondly the Muslims. The Jews are have been targeted with conspiracy theories from literally all of history. I mean, look back to the medieval times, you'll see them constantly being accused of violating the Bible and then being kicked out of cities or spreading the Black Plague. They're targeted a lot. The Holocaust did not help with this. A lot of Holocaust denialism. I did not have the time to write about this, unfortunately. That's another set of beliefs that is unfortunately emphasized a lot. So to get back to your question, first about Instagram not being discussed. Yes, pretty much every single social media platform has a lot of conspiracy theorists. There is a section that has a lot of conspiracy theories. I'm not saying that Instagram is innocent. I'm just saying it's not one of the worst four. Second, in terms of the different, so here's what I'll say. For the Republicans are more right-leaning, which means that they typically pick up the neo-Nazis who are Holocaust denialists. And then the left wing don't like what's happening in Gaza. So they pick up conspiracy theories around there. So both sides have different parts. Even though the mainline Republican Party may support Israel, the more extreme parts may still dislike the religion that Israel has. Yes.
So, you said that Instagram wasn't one of the worst four. I'm not disagreeing with you. I just feel like on YouTube, you have to search up the conspiracy theories to get them recommended to you. But within the first week of using Instagram, I started seeing and
Yeah.
It feels like they just try to shove it on your throat. Not only conspiracy theories, there's
a lot of misinformation in general. Yeah. So here's what I'll say. I'm not I think all more short form, the shorter the content, the more likely you are to happen to run into that stuff, purely because you will consume more. I mean, in Instagram, it's just like pictures and maybe short videos. You can go through a lot more of those than your typical 15-minute or hour-long YouTube video. The YouTube algorithm is also a fair bit more advanced. So if you, only watch stuff about like, I don't know, dinosaurs, it's pretty much just going to recommend you dinosaur stuff. It doesn't like to deviate much from the norm. But more short form stuff like Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, that will give you a wider variety of stuff. Yeah, and then once again, Instagram, I'm not denying it's not bad. I'm pretty sure it uses the same algorithm as Facebook, and we all heard about how that went. But I don't have any specific data on Instagram's conspiracy tendencies.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to keep asking questions.
It's no problem.
Really
Yeah.
enraptured with this. By the way, you're doing phenomenal.
Thank you.
I'm interested in, you guys study epistemology in Global Scholars. Right?
Yes.
You mentioned epistemology. What is the relationship between epistemology and conspiracy theories? I mean, epistemology is sort of the science of knowing how we know things, what we know. Do conspiracy theories, are they ever a legitimate part of an epistemological sort of reference? Because you're coming to an interesting and almost inevitable conclusion that conspiracy theories are almost defined by the conspiracists, right? In some way, and at points it's really hard to know whether they're accurate or right or wrong or any of that, right? So I'm wondering how this affects like just the way we see reality, because it seems to me that like most people live their lives skirting the edge of conspiracy theories, not the major ones you talked about,
But yeah,
but
minor.
just
Yeah.
even in daily life. Oh, Susie said this about me. She must hate me, right? I mean, you could come up with all those things on a daily basis almost. Oh, the teacher gave me a C. They just don't like me. I keep doing a good job. Keep doing what they want. They keep giving me C's, etc. I'm interested in your thought on sort of epistemological references and just even daily life with conspiracy theories. Because the more I think about this, the more I wonder if all of us aren't somehow engaged in our own little way in being conspiracy theorists of sorts. Does that answer this question?
Yes. So I did not study this paper from a specifically epistemological point of view. But what I will say is that I did study partially how like the human brain works and how we've evolved to treat things. And a big part of there's two main ideas that I think feed into this. One is patternicity, which is our brain's tendency to look for patterns. Because, we're, relatively speaking, evolutionary. This is all really, really new. Our body has not had time to adapt to this. And so the brain that was looking for snakes in the grass is now looking for the deep state on Twitter. So we are still very prone to look for patterns, and humans are biased towards accepting those patterns rather than denying them, because it's better to think that the snake is in the grass when it isn't than to not think there's a snake in the grass when there is, because that might, kill you. And then the second is that our culture kind of embeds us with a set of expectations. And this is especially visible in regards to like people. This can be seen in like the JFK and Diana assassinations especially, where for those people, for famous people especially, we kind of treat them as above or unique compared to the average person. Which means that when they got assassinated, people were like, this doesn't make sense. Accidents don't happen to these people. So clearly, there's a pattern here. Someone must be hiding something, someone must have done it. Because if they didn't, that means we just randomly are going to die, and we don't like that. We like to feel in control of what is going to happen to us and what might happen. So epistemology, I'm not sure. Evolutionary, yes, we do like it. The evolution, the lizard brain likes the conspiracy theories a lot. That's what I'll say.
Do you study sports at all?
Sports, not really. I know there's a lot of them because my brother is a very big football fan. And as he said, a lot of them come from that side of the household which means a lot of them are sports, but I can't say any in particular, I'm sorry.
I was gonna say just a follow-up, like, doesn't that sort of, isn't what we were talking about here a little bit more about, like, what is misinformation versus a conspiracy theory versus, like, you know, when is it considered, you know, a conspiracy theory versus just spouting out, oh, yes, I'm going to see in that class or something like that, and, I can't remember what my point was gonna be a little bit about that, but it's like the definition of things and,
I'm just going to point back to the definition. It's a conspiracy. If you want to boil it down, it's a conspiracy theory if someone is causing it. If you're just saying, I got a bad grade and that sucks, that's misinformation potentially. If you're saying I got a bad grade and it's not my fault, that could be misinformation. If you're saying I got a bad grade, it's not my fault, and it's insert teachers here's doing because they don't like me, that's a conspiracy theory. If there's a party being blamed, whether it be a person, a group, a government, I don't know, that is a conspiracy theory. Beyond that, definitions are entirely arbitrary and made up by other humans, so, you know, I could entirely redefine it tomorrow, and then nothing is a conspiracy theory. So, yeah.